The floating palace of Draculon shimmered in the morning light, its crystalline spires catching the dawn's first rays. Half futuristic citadel, half organic crystal, the palace was both a wonder of engineering and a testament to draconic magic. As Draculon entered the year of the scorching wing, the palace was especially resplendent, adorned with banners of flame-hued silk that rippled in the wind. In the depths of the royal kitchens, Elawan scrubbed vigorously at a crystal cauldron, her arms aching from the effort. The slime from yesterday's failed protein experiment clung stubbornly to the sides, refusing to yield even to her most determined efforts. Around her, the kitchen was in a state of humorous chaos. Staff shrieked as goo from another pot suddenly exploded, sending everyone ducking for cover. Elawan barely managed to slide beneath a nearby table before the pollen-spraying vents activated, coating several unfortunate kitchen hands in a fine yellow dust. Move faster, scullion," barked High Steward Calderon, his imposing figure silhouetted against the entryway. "The grand feast begins at sunset, and these cauldrons must sparkle." Elawan nodded meekly, her thin frame hunched over as she redoubled her efforts. As a peasant kitchen hand assigned to the royal kitchens, she occupied the lowest rung on the palace hierarchy. Her days were spent scrubbing, peeling, and occasionally chopping ingredients deemed too mundane for the skilled chefs to handle. "Have the royal dragonlings eaten their breakfast?" a nearby cook whispered to Chef Maribel, who stood inspecting a tray of crystallized fruits. Maribel's face clouded. "Not a morsel. Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor have rejected every dish prepared since dawn. The queen is most displeased." Elawan's ears perked up despite herself. The newborn dragonlings were the talk of the palace capricious, demanding, and seemingly impossible to please. 3 cooks had already been dismissed for failing to tempt their appetites. "They say the twins haven't eaten properly in 3 days," continued Maribel, her voice dropping lower. "The queen grows concerned for their health." A sudden commotion at the main entrance silenced all conversation. The kitchen staff froze as Queen Seraphina herself swept into the room, her scaled cloak shimmering with iridescent colors that shifted with each movement. Behind her trailed 2 attendants carrying silk-lined baskets, from which small, huffing sounds emerged. "Where's the royal chef?" the queen demanded, her voice resonating with authority. High Steward Calderon bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, he is preparing the phoenix spice stew as we speak, a delicacy that will surely—" A loud crash interrupted him as the royal chef burst through the side door, his face ashen. "Your Majesty, disaster! The phoenix spice steward has killed 3 kitchen drones." Gasps echoed throughout the kitchen. The queen's eyes narrowed dangerously, scales along her neck flaring with anger. "Incompetence," she hissed. "My children starve while your concoctions poison my servants." From the silk baskets, 2 small draconic heads emerged, one with scales of deepest purple, the other a burnished gold. Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor surveyed the kitchen with bright, intelligent eyes, their tiny wings unfurling in curiosity. The royal chef prostrated himself. "Your Majesty, I have tried every delicacy from across the 7 aerial kingdoms. The dragonlings refuse everything." The queen's gaze swept the kitchen, landing finally on Elawan, who had inadvertently stepped into view while attempting to edge away from the confrontation. "You," the queen said, pointing a talon directly at Elawan's heart. "What is your name, scullion?" "Elawan, your Majesty," she stammered, curtsying so deeply she nearly toppled over. Something in the queen's expression shifted. Calculation, perhaps, or divine inspiration. "My puppies shall dine only on food made by that poor scullion," she decreed, her voice ringing through the kitchen. Silence fell, broken only by the soft purring of the dragonlings who had suddenly fixed their gaze on Elawan with unexpected interest. "But, Your Majesty," protested Calderon, "she is merely a kitchen hand, untrained in the culinary arts suitable for royal consumption." "Then she will learn," replied the queen coldly. "My children have rejected the finest cuisine in the realm. Perhaps they will find something appealing in simplicity." She turned to Elowen. "You have until sunset to prepare a meal they will eat. Fail, and you will join the ranks of the dismissed." With that, the queen departed, leaving the silk baskets and their precious occupants in the care of attendants who placed them on a crystal dais in the center of the kitchen. The moment the queen left, chaos erupted anew. Chefs argued about protocol, servants whispered furiously, and Calderon turned a venomous glare on Elowen. "You heard Her Majesty," he said with barely concealed contempt. "Cook for the royal dragonlings. But know this: when you fail, as you surely will, I shall personally escort you from the palace gates." Elowen stood frozen, terror and disbelief warring within her. How could she, a mere scullion, prepare food worthy of draconic royalty? But as the kitchen slowly returned to its frantic preparations for the evening feast, she gathered her courage and approached the silk baskets. Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor regarded her with identical expressions of haughty expectation. When Elowen tentatively offered them a plate of the leftover crystallized fruits from Maribel's tray, they turned their snouts away in perfect synchronization. "They detest sweet things," offered one of the attendants helpfully, "and sour and bitter and most savory flavors as well." "What are they like?" asked Elowen desperately. The attendant shrugged. "If we knew, you wouldn't be in this predicament." Panic rising, Elowen turned to the vast array of ingredients available in the royal kitchen. She had to try something, anything, or face dismissal and shame. With trembling hands, she began to prepare dishes that represented her best guess at what might please the finicky dragonlings. First came roasted carrion lizard, a delicacy among certain dragon species. The twins sniffed it once and turned away. Next, she tried crystallized starfruit in a bed of spiced moss. Not even a lick. Desperate, she even attempted a drizzle of molten gold syrup, rumored to be irresistible to dragons of noble lineage. The dragonlings merely yawned, their disinterest apparent. As the day wore on, Elowen grew increasingly frantic. Every dish she prepared was spurned without hesitation. The kitchen staff, initially amused by her predicament, began to show signs of concern as the hours ticked by. Even Calderon's smug expression had given way to worry, for if the dragonlings did not eat soon, the queen's wrath would fall on them all. "Perhaps you need better ingredients," suggested Chef Maribel quietly, approaching Elowen during a moment of defeat. Unlike the others, Maribel had watched Elowen's efforts with sympathy rather than scorn. "I could show you how to balance the spices properly, grateful for any assistance." Elowen accepted Maribel's guidance. Together they created dishes of increasing complexity and refinement, yet the result remained unchanged. The dragonlings refused everything. By late afternoon, guards had begun to hover near the kitchen door, a silent reminder of the queen's expectations and the consequences of failure. Elowen sat on a stool, head in her hands, utterly defeated. "I'm nothing but a serf," she whispered to herself. "How could I possibly know what royal dragonlings desire?" In her despair, she absent-mindedly reached for a bowl of plain gruel she had prepared for herself, the same humble fare she often shared with stray orphans in her village when she could spare it. It was nothing special. Simple grains, a touch of root vegetable, and clean water, simmered until soft. As she stirred the gruel, a small sound caught her attention. Princess Lixis had raised her head, nostrils flaring with sudden interest. Beside her, Prince Luxor mimicked the gesture, their eyes fixed on Elowen's bowl. scarcely daring to hope. Elowen scooped a small portion of gruel onto a plate and cautiously approached the dragonlings. To the astonishment of everyone in the kitchen, both puppies leaned forward eagerly, their tiny forked tongues flicking out to taste the offering. "Impossible," exclaimed Calderon, who had been watching with increasing satisfaction as each of Elowen's attempts failed. "They cannot possibly prefer peasant slop to royal cuisine." But the evidence was undeniable. The dragonlings devoured the simple gruel with obvious relish, purring contentedly as they licked the plate clean. For the first time in days, they had eaten a full meal. Word of this miracle spread quickly through the palace. By the time Queen Seraphina returned to check on the progress, a crowd of curious courtiers had gathered at the kitchen entrance. "What sorcery is this?" demanded the queen, observing her children's evident satisfaction. "No sorcery, your majesty," replied Elowen, bowing deeply. "Just simple gruel, the kind eaten by common folk." The queen's expression was unreadable as she studied the empty plate and her contented offspring. "Interesting," she said finally. "You will continue to prepare this gruel for my children until further notice." As the queen departed with her now fed puppies, the kitchen erupted in celebration. Elowen had succeeded where master chefs had failed. But amid the congratulations, she caught sight of Calderon's face, twisted with fury and suspicion. This victory, she realized, had only bought her time and perhaps made a dangerous enemy. The following days established a routine. Each morning, Elowen would prepare fresh gruel for the dragonlings, who eagerly awaited her arrival. She experimented slightly with the recipe, discovering they particularly enjoyed the addition of certain root vegetables and herbs from her village. But her newfound status as the dragonlings' chosen cook did not come without challenges. Other cooks, jealous of her success or loyal to Calderon, began to sabotage her ingredients, hiding her grains, contaminating her herbs, or accidentally knocking over her cooking pots. Each time, Elowen was forced to start again, often working well into the night to ensure the dragonlings would have their meal ready by morning. "You must be careful," warned Maribel one evening, helping Elowen clean up yet another accident. "The High Steward sees you as a threat to his authority. He has been the Queen's most trusted advisor in matters of court cuisine for decades." "But I don't want his position," protested Elowen. "I just want to feed the dragonlings and keep my place here." Maribel smiled sadly. In court politics, success can be as dangerous as failure. As if to confirm Maribel's warning, the next morning Elowen found all her gruel ingredients missing. Panic-stricken, she searched every storage room and pantry to no avail. With feeding time approaching and no supplies to be found, she made a desperate decision. She would seek help from the court alchemist. The alchemistry tower stood apart from the main palace, connected by a crystal bridge that hummed with energy. Elowen had never dared venture there before, but desperation drove her forward. Inside, she found a labyrinth of bubbling vials, floating sigils, and walls lined with ingredients both mundane and extraordinary. "Who disturbs my calculations?" called a voice from behind a curtain of shimmering smoke. "Elowen, from the kitchens," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I seek an audience with court alchemist Vial." The smoke parted to reveal a tall figure with kaleidoscopic eyes that never seemed to settle on a single color. "I am Vial," he said, studying her with interest. "The dragonling's cook. Are you not? Your sudden rise has been the talk of many circles." Elowen explained her predicament, the missing ingredients, the looming feeding time, the certain punishment if she failed to provide the dragonling's meal. "I can provide what you need," said Vial after a thoughtful pause. "Grains more nutritious than any found in the royal storerooms. herbs that will strengthen growing wings and sharpen young minds. Hope surged within Eloan. "Thank you. I can offer payment from my wages." Vial waved a dismissive hand. "I have no interest in coin, but there is a favor I would ask in return." "What favor?" "In 3 days' time, when the moon is dark, bring a single scale from each dragonling to my tower. Just one, they shed them naturally as they grow. These scales have properties useful in my research." Eloan hesitated. Taking anything from the royal dragonlings without permission seemed dangerous, possibly even treasonous. Yet without Vial's help, she would fail her duty today. "I cannot promise to bring you scales," she said carefully. "But I will try to find something of equal value for your research." Vial's kaleidoscopic eyes narrowed. Then he laughed. "Caution, wise in a palace full of intrigue. Very well, take what you need today. We shall discuss payment when the time comes," armed with Vial's superior ingredients. Eloan hurried back to the kitchens and prepared the morning gruel just in time. The dragonlings ate with their usual enthusiasm, seemingly unaware of the crisis that had nearly deprived them of their meal. As she cleaned up afterward, Eloan noticed an ancient-looking book that had been placed among her cooking utensils, a collection of folk remedies and common recipes from across the realm. Inside the cover was a note in elegant script. "Knowledge is protection. M." Maribel's gift proved invaluable as the days passed. From its pages, Eloan learned variations of her gruel recipe that introduced subtle nutritional benefits while maintaining the simplicity the dragonlings craved. She also discovered, tucked between the pages, hints of an old draconic legend about the significance of a dragon's first chosen food. Curious to learn more, Eloan ventured to the palace library during her rare free hours. The vast circular chamber housed scrolls and tomes from every corner of the known world, and at its center burned an eternal flame tended by a sacred fire drake, a distant cousin to the royal dragons, bound by ancient pact to serve as keeper of knowledge. "Seeker," acknowledged the drake as Eloan approached, its voice a melodious hiss. "What wisdom do you pursue?" "I wish to understand why the royal dragonlings prefer simple food to delicacies," Eloan explained. The fire drake's eyes gleamed with interest. "Ah, you are the chosen one, the puppy's choice. There is an ancient prophecy. The puppy's choice will decide Draculon's fate." "Me?" Eloan shook her head in disbelief. "There must be some mistake. I'm just a kitchen hand." "Prophecies care little for titles," replied the drake. "Look there, in the eastern alcove. The draconic nurturing codex may hold answers you seek." The tome was massive, bound in what appeared to be dragon hide, its pages thin as gossamer but surprisingly durable. Much of it was written in ancient draconic script that Eloan couldn't decipher, but illustrations and translated passages provided some insight. A dragon's first willing food creates a bond. The simpler the fare, the purer the connection. Royal dragonlings who choose humble nourishment may grow to be the wisest rulers, for they see value beyond appearance. Days turned into weeks as Eloan settled into her role as the dragonling's personal cook. The puppies, initially demanding and temperamental, began to show signs of attachment to her, chirping happily when she entered the royal nursery, allowing her to stroke their growing scales, even following her around the kitchen when permitted to leave their baskets. "They've imprinted on you," observed Maribel one morning as Prince Luxor playfully wound himself around Eloan's ankles. "It's rare, but not unheard of. Dragons sometimes form bonds with those who care for them in their earliest days. This growing bond did not go unnoticed by the court. Queen Seraphina began to summon Eloan regularly to report on her children's development and eating habits. During these audiences, Eowyn caught glimpses of the monarch beyond her regal Faiadea mother, genuinely concerned for her offspring's welfare. They are more balanced since you began feeding them, the queen admitted during one such meeting. Less prone to tantrums, more curious about their surroundings. Simple food grounds them, your majesty, Eowyn suggested, drawing on what she had learned from the library. It connects them to the earth from which all life draws strength. The queen studied her thoughtfully. You speak with unexpected wisdom for one of your station. Not everyone viewed Eowyn's growing influence positively. High Steward Calderon, in particular, watched her rise with increasing alarm. His position as the queen's culinary advisor had been effectively usurped by a common scullion, and his attempts to discredit her had thus far failed. One evening, as Eowyn prepared the dragonling's dinner, Calderon approached with an uncharacteristically pleasant demeanor. You've proven me wrong, kitchen girl, he said, smiling thinly. Your simple fare has indeed satisfied our royal charges. Eowyn, surprised by this apparent change of heart, nodded cautiously. Thank you, High Steward. In fact, he continued, I believe it's time your contribution was properly acknowledged. The Queen is hosting a banquet for allied warlords 3 days hence. I shall recommend that your gruel be served to the dragonlings during the feast, before all our distinguished guests. Alarm bells rang in Eowyn's mind. Such public exposure seemed designed to set her up for failure. The dragonlings might be uncomfortable eating in such a crowded setting, she suggested. Calderon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nonsense. It will be a perfect opportunity to showcase their growth and your unusual talent. He departed before she could raise further objections. That night, unable to sleep, Eowyn returned to the library seeking guidance. The fire drake greeted her with unusual solemnity. The stars shift, it hissed. Danger approaches the puppy's choice. The banquet, Eowyn guessed. Calderon means to humiliate me. Or worse, suggested the drake. Many seek power through proximity to the throne. A servant who holds the royal dragonling's affection holds influence some might kill to possess. What should I do? The drake's flame flickered thoughtfully. Beneath the palace lie the crystal hot springs, sacred healing waters where dragonkind has renewed itself for millennia. In times of greatest need, those waters may offer protection. Eowyn spent the next days preparing for the banquet with painstaking care. She personally selected and inspected every ingredient, tested each batch of gruel herself, and studied the layout of the great hall to plan the quickest route to the kitchens should fresh preparations be needed. The night of the banquet arrived with all the pomp and circumstance befitting a gathering of allied warlords. The great hall blazed with crystal light, reflecting off the scales and armor of assembled dignitaries. At a special dais near the queen's throne sat Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor, now triple their original size, their scales gleaming with health. Eowyn, dressed in clean but simple kitchen garb, waited nervously in the serving area. The dragonling's meal sat ready, a special preparation of her gruel enhanced with nutrients from Viel's supplies and herbs recommended in Maribel's book. As the first courses were served to the assembled guests, Calderon appeared at her side. Allow me to inspect the royal meal, he said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Before Eowyn could object, he had taken the bowl and was examining it closely. Seems adequate, he pronounced, returning it with a slight smile that sent chills down her spine. When the time came to serve the dragonlings, Eowyn approached the dais with the ceremonial bowl. The hall fell silent as all eyes turned to watch this unusual spectacle, a common servant feeding the royal offspring before the realm's elite. Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor greeted her with happy chirps, their tails swishing in anticipation. Iloan set the bowl before them and stepped back with a deep curtsy to the queen. The dragonlings leaned forward eagerly, then suddenly recoiled, hissing in distress. Before the shocked assembly, they began to tremble, their scales dulling from vibrant hues to sickly gray. "What have you done?" roared the queen, rising from her throne as guards rushed forward. "Poison," shouted Calderon, pointing an accusing finger at Iloan. "The kitchen girl has poisoned the royal heirs." Chaos erupted in the hall. Warlords reached for weapons, courtiers scattered in panic, and guards surrounded Iloan with spears leveled at her heart. "I would never harm them," she cried, but her protests were lost in the tumult. The dragonlings collapsed on the dais, their tiny bodies convulsing. In that moment of crisis, Iloan made a desperate decision. Breaking free from the guard's circle with unexpected agility, she scooped up both puppies and fled the hall. "Seize her!" bellowed Calderon, but Iloan had already disappeared down a servant's passage, clutching the suffering dragonlings to her chest. Her feet carried her instinctively toward the one place the fire drake had mentioned, the crystal hot springs beneath the palace. Few knew the path, but Iloan had studied old kitchen maps that showed the ancient access routes used by servants who once drew the healing waters for royal baths. Down spiraling crystal stairs she ran, through forgotten corridors thick with dust, and finally into a vast cavern that glowed with inner light. The crystal hot springs spread before her, a series of pools that shimmered with iridescent energy. Steam rose in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, forming and reforming into draconic symbols. Gently, Iloan lowered the trembling dragonlings into the nearest pool. The water embraced them, swirling around their scaled bodies with luminous purpose. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, both puppies gasped and their eyes flew open, scales regaining color as the water's magic purged the poison from their systems. "Thank the ancients," whispered Iloan, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Indeed, thank them," said a powerful voice behind her. Whirling around, Iloan found herself facing Queen Seraphina, who had followed alone, moving with the silent grace of her kind. "Your Majesty, the dragonlings, they were poisoned. I had to bring them here." "I know," interrupted the queen, her gaze fixed on her recovering children. "The question is, who poisoned them?" From the depths of the largest pool, massive forms began to emerge. Ancient fire drakes, their scales encrusted with crystal formations, eyes burning with the wisdom of centuries. They circled the chamber, coming to rest in a semicircle behind the queen. "The waters have spoken," intoned the largest drake, its voice reverberating through the cavern. The poison was dripped into the food after its preparation, by a hand that serves but seeks to rule. "Calderon," Iloan whispered. The queen's scales flared with fury. "Bring him," she commanded, seemingly to the air itself. Moments later, guards appeared at the cavern entrance, dragging a struggling Calderon between them. "Your Majesty," he stammered, eyes widening at the sight of the ancient fire drakes. "This servant fled with your children. She is the poisoner." "Silence," roared the queen. "The crystal springs have revealed your treachery." One of the ancient drakes moved forward, fixing Calderon with a gaze that seemed to pierce through to his very soul. Under that unrelenting stare, the High Steward crumbled, falling to his knees. "I only sought to remove the girl," he confessed, voice breaking. "Her influence was becoming too great. The puppies prefer her to their own kind. It defies natural order." "And so you risked my children's lives?" The queen's voice was deadly quiet. While this confrontation unfolded, Iloan noticed the dragonlings had fully recovered and were now playfully splashing in the healing waters. On impulse, she scooped some of the crystal-infused liquid into their gruel bowl, which she had carried in her flight. The mixture glowed briefly, then settled into a pearlescent consistency. The puppies, smelling the transformed food, paddled eagerly to the edge of the pool. Ilawan offered them the bowl, and they ate with even greater enthusiasm than usual, their scales beginning to shine with unprecedented brilliance. The ancient fire drakes murmured among themselves, their voices like distant thunder. "The prophecy unfolds," said one. "The humble feeds the mighty, and both are transformed." Queen Seraphina, having ordered Calderon removed to the palace dungeons, turned her attention to this remarkable scene. "What have you done?" she asked Elowen, but with curiosity rather than accusation. "Combined their favorite food with the healing waters," Elowen explained. "It seemed right, somehow." The largest of the ancient drakes nodded approvingly. The puppy's choice has discovered what generations of royal cooks forgot, that nourishment is not merely about sustenance, but about connection. The crystal springs once fed all of Draculon, until pride led us to seek rarer delicacies and forget our roots. As if in response to these words, the air in the cavern began to shimmer. From the pools rose tendrils of crystal-infused vapor that spiraled upward through hidden vents in the ceiling. "The ancient ventilation system," breathed the queen in wonder. "It hasn't functioned in centuries." "The palace air is being purified," explained the drake. "Just as the royal line has been renewed through this humble servant's wisdom." In the days that followed, extraordinary changes swept through Draculon. The crystal-infused air from the rejuvenated springs brought new vitality to the palace and its inhabitants. Plants grew with unprecedented vigor. Ailments that had plagued courtiers mysteriously vanished, and the mood throughout the floating citadel lightened perceptibly. A formal ceremony was held in the great hall, now cleansed of any lingering traces of Calderon's treachery, before the assembled court and allied warlords. Queen Seraphina addressed the unprecedented events. "Draculon has been reminded of an ancient truth," she proclaimed. "That greatness does not always wear a crown or speak with a cultured tongue. Sometimes it arrives in the form of simple compassion." She beckoned Elowen forward, who approached the throne with appropriate humility but no longer the crushing self-doubt that had once defined her. "Ilawan of the Kitchens," announced the queen, "for your service to the royal dragonlings and the revelation of treachery that threatened our realm, I grant you the title of Royal Hearthkeeper. You shall oversee the preparation of all food within these walls, with authority to teach common recipes throughout the realm." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. Such a title had not been bestowed in living memory. It harkened back to days when dragons and humans had first formed their alliance. Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor, who had been waiting impatiently on their cushions, now bounded forward. Before the startled gathering, they performed an ancient draconic ritual, circling Elowen 3 times before touching their snouts to her forehead. "The heart of Draculon," translated the queen, awe evident in her voice. "My children have named you thus in the old tongue. They have formed a bond with you that not even I could command or forbid." In the aftermath of these events, many changes came to the palace. Chef Maribel was reinstated as master cook, working alongside Elowen to integrate traditional dishes with royal cuisine. Court alchemist Vael, who had been prepared to face punishment for his involvement in the scale trading scheme, was instead forgiven when he offered his expertise in harvesting healing herbs to complement the crystal waters. As for the queen herself, she publicly embraced a new philosophy that valued simple compassion over ostentatious display. The royal dragonlings, growing rapidly under Elowen's care, developed personalities that balanced noble bearing with genuine empathy, traits rarely seen in combination among draconic royalty. The most significant change, however, was the establishment of a communal hearth in a courtyard between the palace and the surrounding city. Here, Elawan spent part of each day teaching villagers and palace guards alike the art of nutritious, accessible cooking. The boundaries between the floating citadel and the world below began to dissolve as common folk found themselves welcomed into spaces previously reserved for the elite. "Your gruel has transformed more than just my children," the queen remarked one evening, finding Elawan tending the communal hearth after a busy day. "It has transformed Draculon itself." Elawan smiled, watching as a palace guard and a village elder shared a recipe across the flames. "Food has always had that power, Your Majesty. It's just that sometimes we forget to look for magic in simple things." The queen nodded thoughtfully before departing, leaving Elawan to her work. As twilight deepened and the hearth-gatherers dispersed to their homes, Elawan remained, enjoying a rare moment of solitude. A soft rustling from the rafters caught her attention. Looking up, she spotted a small messenger Drakia, distant cousin to the royal line, known for carrying whispers and rumors throughout the realm. It regarded her with bright, curious eyes before deliberately dropping a scroll at her feet. The message inside was brief but clear. Reports of unusual draconic activity in the western mountains. Scales of unknown origin washing up on distant shores. And a curious prophecy circulating among the nomadic sky tribes. When the heart beats strongest, the wings shall unfold. Elawan tucked the scroll into her pocket with a small smile. Her life had changed beyond recognition in the span of a few short months. From humble scullion to trusted royal advisor. Whatever new adventure might be brewing on the horizon, she would face it with the same quiet courage and compassion that had brought her this far. In the royal nursery, Princess Lixis and Prince Luxor dreamed dragon dreams of crystal waters and nourishing gruel, their growing wings twitching in anticipation of future flights. And throughout the floating palace of Draculon, the air shimmered with renewed vitality, carrying the promise of a more balanced future for all who dwelled within its crystalline embrace.